Hi, Sagittarius. Welcome to your November 2018 Astro Update. It's Rena, and this is a very big month, especially for Sagittarius. And I am Sun in Sagittarius myself. So, Jupiter going into our sign is monumental, once every 12 years, and I would actually say 13 years because when you consider that some of these cycles, Jupiter is in for 13 months, like the one that's in Sagittarius is going to be from November 8th of 2018 until I believe December 2nd of 2019. So almost 13 months. And I've already done a video specifically for Sagittarius Sun and Rising on what to expect during this transit of Jupiter in Sagittarius for Sagittarians. So check that out on my channel. The other thing that is going on is that we have the North Node changing signs. From Leo, which is a fellow fire sign, and for Sagittarius, the Leo transit has been occurring in our 9th house, which is the God house. But the way that the North Node transits is backwards, like a retrograde. So it's going to go into the sign before it, which is Cancer. For Sagittarians, Cancer is the 8th house, which is other people's money. The North Node is an influence of destiny that comes into our life. I'm talking about the transit specifically. But, you know, the natal North Node is going to have similar characteristics, but we're discussing the temporary residence, if you will, of the North Node in the 8th house. And this is exciting because other people's money and the serendipity that we associate with the transiting North Node could mean that we have a destiny when it comes to receiving certain money for whatever reason. And I just wanted to talk about something related to this because I do read extensively online comments that are made, and this can be on a wide variety of issues. But one of the things that always irritates me is when people put down wealthy people, people who have inherited sometimes great fortunes, and act like, well, they looked into it, they didn't earn it themselves, and the 8th house is about money that you receive that you didn't earn by the sweat of your brow. And what irritates me about it isn't because I am a millionaire and I come from a wealthy background. No. It's because the more I embrace the law of attraction and the more that I look around me and my environment and observe, and my experiences with people who have transferred wealth from one person to the next, I really believe that when you receive money and it's not from dishonorable means, that it's a transfer of wealth, whatever that means to the individual, is that you earned the money. You earned it by virtue of receiving it. If you have it, you deserve it. And sometimes people who inherit money feel very uncomfortable about that. And they always feel guilty. They always feel like, I didn't do anything to deserve this. Yes, they did. At the very least, we can say, how do we know that they didn't do anything to deserve it? Good karma? Anyone? So, dealing with other people's money can sometimes be fraught with all sorts of neurotic reactions. And sometimes it is discomfort, not wanting help, or even a gift, the eighth house being gifted with money. It can be an inheritance, and it can work both ways. Sometimes people become vicious because of greed. And of course, that's not cool either. But somehow you may be coming in contact with other people's money, and it's rightfully yours. If you're getting a sum of money and maybe it was something you didn't expect and you feel uncomfortable about it because, I don't know, you don't feel that you deserved it, you might want to change that attitude, because the North Node transiting means that it's fulfilling a destiny. And destiny is a strange thing, because we always talk about free will versus destiny, right? The chicken and the egg syndrome, or can we have both at the same time? My feeling is that it's all free will, but some of the quote unquote destiny is actually planned out before we're born. So it appears as if it is random, a random good luck, turn of good luck, or you meeting your soulmate in a very unexpected way. But really, it was done by design. And one book that really impressed this upon me about the idea of the soul planning out certain major events before it incarnates is Michael Newton's Journey of Souls. And I highly, highly recommend it. I've read that. I've reread it many times, and it's a bestseller. You may have read it yourself. And he has another book, too, that I've read called Destiny of Souls or something. But the first one was the one that really did it for me. The other one's good, too, though. So that's what the North Node in the 8th house means to me. Also, the 8th house is the house of intimacy. So to me, it's like the soulmate. It could be associated. I think I was watching another astrologer who linked the 8th house with the soulmate. And I said, you know what? I agree with her. I believe it was a female. And I was like, okay, that makes sense to me, because the 7th house is kind of like the window dressing of the wedding, the hideous bride dresses that I keep talking about, and the party, the after party, and, the piece of jewelry, the contract. But the 8th house is the real deal. The soul contract, maybe. The soul contract might be the 12th house, but I'm trying to play on words here. Intimacy, deep intimacy. It's a water house, Scorpio, so it's dealing with emotions and the soul. Okay, so let's talk about some of these transits. I just wanted to give an overview about the North Node into Cancer for Sagittarius. The sun is going to be in the 12th house for Sag most of the month. This is a time of reflection. This is hermit mode. So get your hermit on. And, make a party of it, if you will. I think I might try that, where just like really revel in silence. I mean, that would be a major challenge for me. I love silence, but it's funny. I love silence, but I'm always turning on some kind of video or something. So there's a bit of cognitive dissonance there. But seriously, what is that saying? Be apart or something like that in the Bible. Maybe you carve out some hermit time every day where you go off in the woods, even if it's like, November in a Midwestern state is pretty harsh sometimes, or, late October. Where I'm I'm recording this in mid-October, so I'm thinking of when it starts to get bad. That's when the sun goes into Scorpio, and that's when it's the 12th house. So from late October until late November, the temperature usually in a lot of states in the United States is pretty cold. The point is that you may naturally feel a lot less inclined to be social during the sun in the 12th house, because the sun is your core self, and even the transiting sun becomes who you are at this time. And you may be more reticent, you may be more contemplative, and that's totally on time for this period. And you may be less energetic. The sun livens us up. And so by the end of the month, and that would be the 22nd this year, you're going to perk up around then when the sun goes into Sagittarius. On the 6th of the month, we have Uranus, which has been retrograding in Taurus, which is the 6th house for Sag, goes back into that 5th house, where it had been for 7 years in Aries, okay? So for those of you who are single, and I'm not single, so I haven't had to be on the market, so to speak. But if you've been single all or most of that time, you may have had a very unusual experience where you had strange people coming into your life. And when I say strange, I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean that they're just kind of eccentric, different, maybe more Aquarians than usual, but certainly that Aquarian vibe of nonconformist types. And so this may, I'm not going to say rear its ugly head, but it may come back into your reality for a bit, for several months until early 2019. I think it's in March, but I'm not exactly sure. I have to check. And for this particular reading, it's not important. Just know that it's temporary. And if you feel like something is really getting disrupted, because when Uranus is retrograde, it's like on steroids. And Uranus is already hard to deal with as it is, because it is a very eccentric type of influence. It doesn't conform to the expected patterns. So for some people, it can feel very irritating to have these hiccups in their life in whatever house that Uranus is transiting. But you've dealt with this for 7 years, so this is old hat to you. You're revisiting something. And if you're an artist, this may have been a wonderful time period, because you may have felt inspired in a totally new way. And that may have kind of given you a whole new audience, a whole new type of direction to go in, and that makes things less stale. Uranus is an innovator, and it loves freedom, but it also loves originality. It doesn't want to be like everyone else. And that in art is very important, because we know that sometimes people are copycats and they take other people's ideas and try to capitalize on them. So it can be very interesting and give you even more ideas, but it's very chaotic in a sense, because it's already unpredictable, and being retrograde doesn't make it less so. And if you have started a business, by the way, because the 5th house is the business that you own, who knows, maybe you have something all of a sudden. I mean, Uranus can connect to the internet where it just goes viral, word of mouth. You started very humbly, and then all of a sudden it blows up. So it's a wild card. And some people look at wild card as synonymous for something negative. And I always see the pure potential of wild card because it means that anything is possible. So that's on the 6th. And then the next day we have the North Node going into Cancer in that 8th house. And we have on the same day the new moon in Scorpio in the 12th house. So I do see a connection between these two events because the 8th and the 12th houses are both water houses, and both are dealing with metaphysical issues. With the 8th house, this can be esoteric studies such as the tarot and astrology. The 12th house is more diffused than that. It's about a sea of souls, I always call it. It's about the collective unconscious. It's connecting us spiritually rather than physically. The 11th house is the collective, but in the mundane sense. In the 12th house, it's the spiritual sense. And the purpose of this is to know that we're all one. And therefore, it lessens suffering because at the root of much suffering is this feeling of isolation, of being apart from God, apart from your fellow man. And this is the understanding that we are all part of this, on the same team, and we're not opposed to one another. And there's a sense of harmony with that. And with the 8th and 12th houses, that spiritual bond, with the water influence, it's emotional and it's a new beginning in spiritual matters for you. So that can take on many forms. You may be studying something new. You may go back to meditation if that's something that you did and you kind of let go of. Remember that Jupiter has been in Scorpio, and actually that new moon is the last day of Jupiter in Scorpio. Well, not technically, because technically on the 8th is when Jupiter goes into Sag, so it means it's going to be in Scorpio for at least a little bit of time. But let's say the last full day. And it just so happens to be the new moon in Scorpio. So in that 12th house, how have you benefited from Jupiter being there? Since Jupiter is your ruler, Sagittarius, have you had mystical experiences in the last 12 months or 13 months? Have you had any kind of upgrade? Any kind of feeling that you are in a better place spiritually than you were before? Have you had some kind of help from unseen forces? And it could even be money. Jupiter can also be about money, but coming from, it's almost like good karma from other lifetimes in the form of a particular person. But as far as you're concerned, you really didn't do anything to deserve it on the conscious level. And you feel like this has something to do with past lives, perhaps. So the day we have all been waiting for, the very next day, Jupiter into Sagittarius in the first house of the self. A whole new Jupiter cycle. By the way, as I always say, these are general forecasts. I remember the first time I was listening to somebody on YouTube, because I've been studying astrology for many years, but not predictive astrology. I've always been concerned with or interested in, fascinated by the different signs themselves, the psychological makeup of the different signs, how they interact with others and things like that, the interpersonal relationships. And by the way, if you're interested in something like that, Linda Goodman, the late astrologer Linda Goodman, she had a really entertaining book. I think she was an Aries. And it was, I don't remember the name of it, How the Signs Love One Another. I can't remember. But I remember reading that book over and over again, as I did many of the astrology books that I bought years ago, and really enjoying that one. But anyway, the point being that I remember watching a video, and an astrologer that I really respected said, oh, by the way, these are just general readings because it really relies on your degree of sun or degree of rising sign. And some astrologers try to take those decans, those 10-degree marks, and do the timing based on that. I'm not even going to attempt that because I'm one of those people, it's easy for me to get confused. So, having said that, I have a link below in my, below this video in the description box, where if you're interested in a natal chart interpretation, you can get one. And the thing about it is, this is like a blueprint for your soul's journey through this lifetime. Now, granted, it's only for this lifetime. This is the important thing. So, it's not that anyone can guarantee that they make predictions and things are going to happen. I'm personally not that fascinated by predictions, even though in my natal chart interpretations, I do have a portion of the reading dedicated to that, looking at the astrological trends, how it impacts people. But the thing about it is that you make your own luck as far as I'm concerned. And you can have the best transits in the world, but that could possibly encourage you to be quite passive and to not go after what you want in life and be quite content to sit on the sidelines and wait for something good to drop in your lap. So it's a double-edged sword in a way, because if the wrong person gets a hold of a forecast, a person who tends to be kind of disempowered in their life, it's not going to make them more empowered unless the astrologer really emphasizes the fact that the person has to step up to the plate in their own life. So that certainly is what I do. And, but, I still am looking forward to Jupiter and Sagittarius. Don't get me wrong. Just because, it's a whole new cycle. And this means that we have the opportunity to start new projects that we see to fruition and things like that. Because when Jupiter's in the 12th house, it's wrapping things up. And by the way, when I was mentioning that all of this is dependent on your sun or rising sign in Sagittarius, I mean, if you're like me and you have the sun in a later degree in the last decan of Sagittarius, you're not going to be experiencing the Jupiter transit in the first house, and I'm talking about the solar chart only, for me specifically, because my rising sign is different. But, it's going to take some time for it to get to that, to your ascendant. So you are still going to have Jupiter in the 12th house. But we're going to talk about things as if we're all experiencing the same transits, because it's way too confusing to me to go into all of that. That's not my strength, and I just would prefer to keep it simple. So with Jupiter in the first house, we can expect general good things, good fortune coming to us, perhaps being seen more, because Jupiter is an amplifier. It expands. It's expansive. So it can create, for those Sagittarians who feel a bit, neglected, ignored. Maybe you're on the shy side. And it's funny because just thinking about me as a fellow Sagittarian, I am kind of shy in public, but I don't like the word shy because I'm not afraid of talking to strangers. I'm not afraid of going up to somebody that I don't know and asking them something. So there are people like that who are afraid of even doing that. I'm not afraid of that. But being in a situation where you have to make small talk, where you have to be entertaining to keep other people's and be open, and that's not me. I have the sun in the 8th house, which is Scorpio's house. You may have the sun in the 12th house, for all you know. So the point I'm making is that having Jupiter in the first house may or may not feel comfortable. If you're somebody that is used to kind of hiding out, if your sun is in the 12th house and you have this transit in the first house, you may feel like, oh God, why? Why do I have to be, so out there, and why are people seeing me? But it can be capitalized on. You can use it to sell yourself if you need a new job. You can use it to sell yourself if you want a new relationship. And there may even be charisma associated with it, because Jupiter in Vedic astrology, like Venus, is considered a benefic planet. And that can lead to being, attracting good luck. As I said, I've already done a separate video on Jupiter in Sagittarius for Sagittarians. So check me out on my channel, and you can listen to another 30 minutes of just that. So on the 15th, Mars goes into Pisces. Pisces is the 4th house of home and family for Sagittarius. Mars, god of war. So not, these are strange bedfellows, not a good mix, home and war. Be careful about fights with family of origin or people in your household, okay? Because Mars can make you aggressive for whatever reason. Maybe you have a righteous anger. But Sagittarians, we're fire signs, so we can have a fiery temper, can we not? Can I get an amen on that? And sometimes I think for Sagittarians, family rubs us the wrong way, because the whole notion of family is communal. We're this group. Let's all be together and let's have groupthink and so on and so forth. Fire signs like Sag, we love to be independent. We don't want anybody telling us who we are. And unfortunately with family, a lot of times they want to keep you in a box. They want to keep you frozen at the age of 10. Or you were with us before you got married. So don't act like you're so different now. When in fact, especially after the first Saturn return, by the age of 30 or early 30s, a lot of people of every sign they start to become self-actualized, or they're in the process of figuring out who they are as individuals. And it's not that it's just like everything is said and done by that period of time. For some people, it can take quite a while. And unfortunately, some people never really become their own person and really truly separate from their family. They're enmeshed, and they stay enmeshed because they feel guilt. They don't understand the importance of being their own people. So there can be a very good reason why you're angry at someone. The fourth house can be the mother. And the thing is that if you're dealing with somebody who is trying to push your buttons, if you're dealing with a narcissistic family member, you're going to, you give them the payoff when you get angry. So it's not even revenge, but the best way to deal with it is to stay above the fray. And come to think of it, with that North Node going into Cancer in the 8th house, maybe it is some kind of an inheritance issue. And there are other family members. Usually the 3rd house would be the siblings, the brothers and sisters, and even cousins. But we could call the 4th house, it's the mother, but we could say the family of origin together, perhaps, your childhood, so the people of your childhood. And maybe there's even a fight about a house, a physical piece of property, because the 4th house can be real estate. So something could be coming into play of a combative nature. However, it may have nothing whatsoever to do with that, and simply be that you are renovating your home and you're doing a gut rehab or putting an addition on. There are lots of hammers and saws, and Mars can be heavy machinery, and that's what you're doing. Venus goes direct the very next day on the 16th in Libra, which is a harmonious sign to Sag, being an air sign and being a sextile to us. So this is the 11th house of your wildest dreams and also your friendships. So you may have had some experience with that Venus retrograde. And I didn't mention this, that Venus goes into that 11th house. Now, this is in the retrograde cycle on the 1st of November. So if you're listening in October, Venus is in Scorpio in the 12th house in retrograde motion. Venus retrograde can be a time of hearing from people from your past, old lovers, for instance. It could be friends, anybody that you have affection for. But in the 12th house, when it's in Scorpio in October, it's like a double whammy in the sense that it's both the karmic house of the 12th house, and also the retrograde can indicate past. A do-over, somebody repeating themselves. Now, maybe this is somebody you have never met in this lifetime, but it is a past life relationship. The thing that I notice with some people, and I feel like it's a trap, is this notion of, it feels so familiar, it must be my soulmate, it must be my twin flame. And it could be your worst nightmare. Repeating itself once again because you haven't resolved the issue. So until you learn the lesson of this relationship, and if this person is abusive, the lesson is to honor thyself. And you honor yourself by not standing for nonsense, putting up with nonsense. And yes, I'm kind of minimizing abuse or other negative treatment, and maybe that's not a good thing to just characterize it as nonsense, but you know what I mean. So Venus goes direct in this 11th house. This is the house of friendships. You may have been reevaluating the crowd that you hang out with. And part of this may be just in general your spiritual quest, with Jupiter in the 12th house, now obviously in the first, but you've had it in the 12th house. Maybe you've really expanded your spiritual posse, if you will, in the last 13 months. And you realize that the regular group of friends that you have is just not cutting it anymore. And you've been kind of like saying, are my values aligned with their values? And it's not anything negative towards them, but it's just that you don't feel like it resonates anymore. So whatever you have been kind of mulling over gets resolved mid-November, and you're moving forward with that Venus in that house. And, the 11th house is the luckiest house, according to someone. And so who knows? Maybe because Venus can bring money. Who knows? And by the way, Venus retrograde can bring money that was owed to you. So maybe while it's retrograding in the 12th house, it might be karmic payment that is due to you, a karmic lotto, or in the 11th house, something from a friend that they haven't paid back in 20 years. And then they're like, okay, well, here it is. And you've forgotten about it, perhaps. And so it's all good. But, and you can even, like, if you're single, you can find love through your circle of friends. And so Mercury goes retrograde on the same day, believe it or not. So you have Venus going direct and then Mercury going retrograde in Sagittarius, so that first house. And you might be thinking, okay, how can I align my talk with my image, how I present myself in terms of like what I say about myself, how what kind of a salesperson am I for myself, and rethinking everything about your image. And when I say your sales pitch, I mean, we all have our own image, and sometimes, we associate it with the way we dress or the way that our personality traits that we want to show to other people. But it's also how we communicate, isn't it? And Sagittarians tend to be very effective communicators because we are to the point, we are fire signs, so we tend to be very honest in communication. Some would call it blunt, but where we're coming from. We're not like phony baloney. And yet we might want to kind of smooth out some rough edges. If some of us are too in your face, too aggressive, as we get older, we tend to mellow a little bit, just a little bit. And when we're younger, we may come across too aggressively sometimes. And this is also dependent on other factors in the chart. So all of these things can benefit you in many ways, including how you come across to others, so that can be the difference of whether or not you get a certain job, whether or not you get a certain client, whether or not you attract that person that you find attractive, whether or not they're attracted to you. It's not good enough for you to be attracted to somebody else. They have to like you too. And first impressions do come into play. So Mercury's going retrograde, so just expect, the typical snafus that everyone else can look forward to for 3.5 weeks. And by the way, Mercury goes direct the day before the new moon in Sagittarius, which is happening on December 7th. So everything gets sorted out in a few weeks. And that'll be a green light period for everybody. So just a few more weeks of these eternal retrogrades that seem to be going on here. And then the full moon in Gemini, 11/22, 2 master numbers. That was when JFK was assassinated, wasn't it? And symbolism is everything. That's what conspiracy theorists will tell you. And that's when the full moon in Gemini, this is the opposite sign of Sagittarius. So this is the 7th house of the other, the partner, okay? So full moon, 7th house, finding out about your partner, learning something about them. Now, that can sound kind of ominous because you might think that I'm saying that you're going to find out that your partner is kicking it with somebody else. I don't know if that's totally outdated, but I just thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, I mean, it could be something along those lines. Of course it could. But it could be that you have a revelation about your partner, that you realize what their needs are. Maybe you've been thinking so much about yourself that you weren't thinking about them. For some people, it could be an ending. Now, don't panic because people know if the relationship is on its last legs. This is not something so out of the blue. This is going to be something that may be a final straw. But especially if you find something out about them that they're cheating again. But it could be that you take it to the next level where you set, like, because a full moon can bring something to culmination. So maybe you've been trying to set your wedding date and you finally have secured a certain, you've cleared something away perhaps to be able to do that. It can be a time where you are ending some kind of a lawsuit, perhaps. The 7th house can be a legal matter. Now, again, with the Mercury retrograde, we have to be careful about contracts or any kind of settlements because that can, if you sign something during a Mercury retrograde, there may be like a little bit of a mistake and you may have to redo something. Now, that might not be the end of the world. Again, I mentioned something about an inheritance, so maybe there's something legalistic going on the 22nd of the month. And then Neptune turns direct in the 4th house of home and family on the 24th. And this can be a time of when Neptune went retrograde in that 4th house, there may have been something that really was made clear to you about an illusion that you had related to home and family, or maybe your childhood. Maybe you thought certain things were rosy and an event happened, or just by happenstance, you read something that triggers a memory and you see it in a totally different light, and it kind of like strips away the illusion of it, or an event happens that makes you realize that everything wasn't what you thought it was. And now that Neptune is direct, you may be once again having this experience of certain kinds of things connected to it. This could even be your home right now that you are not fully aware of or in denial about. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. Sometimes being in denial can save your sanity. If you must function in a particular, for a particular reason. Like, for instance, if you are living in a house and you are not aware that it has termites, but there's no way for you to move, what good does it do to know that there's termites? Maybe it helps you to just like be with your head in the sand. It helps you function better. But so Neptune goes direct on the 24th. And so it's a jam-packed month for sure, Sagittarius. But I think it's a definite crossroads for a lot of us, and not just Sagittarians, every sign, because when December comes around at the time of the new moon in Sagittarius, then we have these planets direct, and we feel that sense of momentum that we felt in pockets of time during the year. But so much of this year has been stop and start, and you may have felt certain frustrations about this. But for us, having Jupiter in our sign, I think that that's going to kind of carry us into like a whole new level of a lot of things happening very, very quickly in succession. I think of in the tarot, the Eight of Wands, which is a fire energy as well, of things happening all at once. So kind of making up for lost time, maybe, who knows? Okay, Sagittarius, so if you enjoyed this and you'd like me to look at your natal chart, I have a link to both of the natal chart readings that I do. Otherwise, have an awesome November. Bye.